When you watch a movie, there is almost always that one really pivotal, highly dramatic scene where a character's entire moral compass is just forged.
Oh, yeah, the grand epiphany scene.
Right. The music swells, time slows down, and they have to choose between the red wire and the blue wire, or they have to stand up to the villain in this crowded room. We were deeply conditioned by pop culture to believe that character is formed in these massive cinematic lightning strikes of decision.
I mean, we love that narrative because it's just so clean, it fits neatly into a 2-hour runtime, and it gives us this illusion that we just need to be ready for our one big heroic moment.
But when you step back and actually look at the mechanics of human behavior, you look at history, psychology, you realize pretty quickly that the cinematic lightning strike is, well, it's a complete myth.
A total myth.
Yeah. Today, we are diving deep into this really fascinating document called The Slow Build to figure out how character is actually forged. And spoiler alert, it is not through dramatic epiphanies. It's a profound and, frankly, slightly uncomfortable reality about how our brains and our habits actually work.
It is uncomfortable, but I also find it incredibly grounding. I know anyone listening to this deep dive right now is probably constantly bombarded with, quick fixes, life hacks, overnight success stories.
It's all the time. It's everywhere.
Right, and it's absolutely exhausting to navigate that kind of information overload because it makes you feel like you are always one big decision away from fixing everything. So what this deep dive offers is a completely different paradigm.
Which is exactly what our mission is today. We're going to unpack that paradigm.
Exactly. Today, we're going to travel from the chaotic streets of ancient Rome to the underwater training regimens of a big wave surfer, and even onto the film sets of director Alfred Hitchcock. We want to show how character is never the result of a single decision.
The foundational takeaway here is that your character, whether it turns out incredibly resilient or dangerously compromised, is the compounding result of what you repeat, who you watch, and what you simply, allow yourself to stop noticing.
Stop noticing. That's the scary part.
Yeah. So before we can look at how our character is tested out there in the chaotic world, we have to look at how we build our internal capacity in isolation. Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting with Steven Pressfield's concept from his book, Gates of Fire.
Such a great concept.
It really is. Pressfield talks about habit not as some boring daily chore like brushing your teeth, but as a trained soldier. He frames habit as an active ally that fights against this internal force he calls resistance.
That image of habit as a trained soldier is crucial because it shifts our entire understanding. I mean, we need to define what Pressfield means by resistance here.
Right, because it's not what people usually think.
No, he isn't talking about external obstacles like a bad boss or a traffic jam. Resistance is that internal gravitational pull toward comfort. It's the voice in your head telling you to hit snooze or, to skip the hard conversation, to do the work tomorrow.
The ultimate procrastinator voice.
Exactly. Pressfield argues that a habit isn't a rule imposed on you from the outside. It's a capacity built from the inside. When you train the mind to think one way and one way only, you produce great strength for when the actual battle starts. You are literally deploying troops against your own laziness.
And we see these intense, real-world examples of this combat against resistance.
Yeah.
Take the legendary choreographer Twyla Tharp. She's famous for starting every single day by waking up at 5:30 in the morning, putting on her workout clothes, walking outside, and calling a cab to take her to a gym for 2 hours.
Every single day.
Every single day. Or take Laird Hamilton, the big wave surfer. He does these grueling underwater training sessions where he holds his breath while carrying heavy weights at the bottom of a pool. And when you first hear that, it's easy to dismiss it and think, oh, well, they're elite athletes. They just need to be physically fit.
Yeah, which is completely missing the point of the behavior. Tharp herself has said the habit isn't the 2-hour workout.
Really? Then what is it?
The habit is getting in the cab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that is the moment she defeats resistance. And Hamilton isn't carrying weights underwater just to build muscle. He is deliberately simulating the panic of being held down by a massive wave. They are drilling the deeper psychological habit of showing up prepared and managing their central nervous system.
So they are voluntarily facing resistance in a controlled environment.
Exactly. And if we look back to antiquity, the Stoic philosopher Seneca offered advice that functions on the exact same psychological mechanism. Seneca constantly counseled his students to take walks.
His normal walks.
Well, he didn't recommend walking as a form of leisurely escape or daydreaming. He prescribed it as deliberate maintenance.
Oh, I see. He talked about walking when you are highly stressed.
Right.
Like walking before you have to make a hard decision or before navigating a difficult conversation.
Exactly. He wrote that the mind needs to be nourished and refreshed by open air and deep breathing. The psychological mechanism at play here is something that modern performance psychologists, like Michael Gervais, talk about constantly today. Mood follows action.
Mood follows action. That's powerful.
It is. Mental focus follows physical focus. Gervais breaks elite training down into 3 domains, which are the mind, the body, and the craft. None of those 3 domains can be trained in a single cram session style event. They have to be built the slow way.
Right.
You take the walk to physically prime the physiological state required for the hard decision. You are regulating your breathing so your brain can access its higher executive functions.
Which brings to mind a much more mechanical analogy. Building these habits in isolation is like installing shock absorbers on a car while it's parked in the garage.
Oh, I like that.
You don't wait until you're hitting massive potholes at 70 miles an hour on the highway to try and bolt them on. You do it in the quiet of the garage. So Seneca's walk, Quayletharp's cab ride, Hamilton's pool, that is garage time. You are building the capacity before the environment actually demands it of you.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. Because if you wait until you hit that pothole, if you wait until the pressure is intensely on you, you are going to default to your highest level of preparation.
And if you haven't been practicing in the garage,
Then your highest level of preparation is 0. You will panic.
wow. But we don't just stay in the garage. We step outside. We interact with coworkers, our families, our friends. In fact, our environment, specifically the people we spend our time watching, is building or breaking our character without us even realizing it. I think everyone has had that experience where you subconsciously start using the exact same catchphrases as your boss, or your stress levels start to mirror the most anxious person in your household.
Yes, the osmosis of character. And this brings us to one of the most powerful historical examples of this. The relationship between Marcus Aurelius and his stepfather, the Emperor Antoninus.
Right, because if Pressfield shows us how habits are built alone, this pairing shows us how character is absorbed through proximity.
Exactly. Marcus Aurelius is widely considered one of the greatest leaders in history. But he didn't get a syllabus from Antoninus on how to be great. He didn't sit in a classroom taking notes. He got years of proximity.
He's just watching the guy operate day in and day out.
Precisely. Marcus literally wrote down the specific traits he absorbed just by watching. Think about the absolute unchecked power Antoninus had as the ruler of the Roman Empire.
He could have done whatever he wanted.
Right. He could have had grapes fed to him all day while lounging on silk. Instead, Marcus watched him work tirelessly until dusk. He watched him eat frugal, simple meals. He watched him yield the floor to genuine experts rather than needing to assert his ego as the smartest guy in the room.
Which is incredibly rare for an emperor.
And most incredibly, he watched Antoninus maintain total composure during the Antonine Plague.
And we really need to pause and visualize the Antonine Plague, because this wasn't just a bad flu season. This was a catastrophic pandemic, likely smallpox, that absolutely devastated the Roman Empire.
It was horrific.
We are talking about millions of people dying, the economy collapsing, the army being decimated, and just total panic in the streets of Rome. In the middle of all that chaos, Antoninus didn't freak out. He didn't look for scapegoats. He just steadily worked the problem. And Marcus, as a young man, sat there and absorbed that composure.
It is profound. Tolstoy wrote about this in his Calendar of Wisdom. He outlined 3 legitimate paths to wisdom. He said meditation is the noblest path, experience is the hardest path, but being influenced by someone or following someone is the easiest path.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Antoninus didn't have to deliver grand lectures on virtue to Marcus. He just lived it consistently over a long period. Marcus simply absorbed it as his own baseline for what normal behavior looked like.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Mark Twain famously joked about this. He said that few things are harder to put up with than the annoyance of a good example.
That is such a Mark Twain thing to say.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But I actually want to push back on that idea for a second. I don't totally get that framing. If I'm around someone whose discipline and kindness are just off the charts, shouldn't I feel inspired by that? Why on earth would that annoy me?
Because inspiration is comfortable. It implies you have a choice. You can look at an inspiring person and say, wow, good for them, and then just go back to your couch. But a genuinely good example, someone you spend every day with, doesn't just inspire. It applies immense unspoken pressure. It holds a mirror right up to your face.
Ah, it strips away your excuses.
Exactly. When you are in the presence of someone who operates at a higher moral or disciplined frequency, your own cut corners, your own laziness suddenly become glaringly obvious to you.
Oh, that is uncomfortable.
Very. You can no longer tell yourself that waking up early or being patient is impossible because the person right next to you is doing it. That forces a deeply uncomfortable choice. You either have to elevate your own behavior to match them, or you grow resentful of them for exposing your flaws. That is why it can feel annoying.
Which opens up a really dark door in this discussion. Because if consistent exposure and small daily repetitions can build incredible character, like it did for Marcus Aurelius, they can also quietly, methodically destroy it. It's just a matter of direction.
What's fascinating here is how this connects to that brilliant idea from Edmund Burke. He said, ambition can creep as well as soar.
Creep as well as soar.
Yeah. The exact same mechanism of the slow build works for corruption and control as it does for virtue. If you look at the legendary film director Alfred Hitchcock, he was an absolute master of this patient accumulation of power.
Oh, the Hitchcock method. The way he ran a movie set is terrifying precisely because it was so boring.
Yeah.
He didn't walk onto a set, scream at everybody, and immediately seize tyrannical control over a script, did he?
No, not at all. If he had done that, the writers and actors would have rebelled immediately. Instead, he just outpatienced everybody.
So what did he actually do?
He would let writers work loosely at first. He gave them the illusion of total freedom. But then, day by day, he would tighten his grip through tiny incremental revisions. He would change a single word here, adjust a camera angle there. He applied immense patience to his ambition. By the time anyone on set realized they had completely lost creative control, they were already months deep into production and too invested in finishing the film his way. It is the exact same mechanism as Twyla Tharp's habit building, but aimed at influence and control instead of personal character.
And when you apply that creeping mechanism to morality, it explains one of the great historical tragedies. The Stoic philosopher Seneca's relationship with the Emperor Nero. Nero is historically remembered as an absolute monster, but there's this period called the Quinquennium Neronis, the 5 good years.
Yes, the first 5 years of Nero's reign were surprisingly stable and prosperous, and they were heavily guided by Seneca. But Seneca was brilliant. He sensed early on that something was deeply wrong with Nero's psychology.
But he stayed.
He stayed. Those 5 good years slowly devolved into 9 terrible years of tyranny, murder, and chaos. And Seneca kept adding his intellectual weight, his speeches, and his reputation to a regime he knew was rotting from the inside.
So how does a genius philosopher rationalize that? How does he stay? He didn't wake up one morning and say, I think I'll support a tyrant today. He must have justified it, compromise by compromise.
Definitely.
He probably told himself, well, if I leave, the Praetorian Guard takes over, and it will be even worse. I can manage him. So he tolerated a tiny bit of cruelty, then a little more, then a little more.
That is the psychology of rationalization, perfectly described. It is the frog in the boiling water. Seneca ignored his own soul's warning, as the historical texts suggest. This is the danger of patience.
Wait, patience is a danger.
Well, patience itself is not inherently a virtue. It is a completely neutral tool. The difference between Antoninus using patience to build a great leader in Marcus and Seneca using patience to enable a monster in Nero was purely the direction in which they applied it.
So how do we spot these unexamined compromises in our own modern lives? We aren't advising Roman emperors, but we all face cut corners, missed reps, or toxic workplace environments that we slowly accept. How do we spot the drift before it permanently alters our trajectory?
You have to run the 5-year test.
The 5-year test.
Yes. You look at your current life, your current habits, and the behaviors you are tolerating from the people around you, and you ask yourself, would the version of me from 5 years ago be shocked by what I am accepting today?
Oh, wow.
If the answer is yes, you are experiencing the slow drift. The creeping compromise has already taken hold.
Would the person I was 5 years ago be shocked by what I tolerate today? That is heavy. To stop that negative drift, we need daily vigilance over our actions. And one of the most fascinating points in this deep dive is that this vigilance has to start with our speech.
Absolutely. Speech is the canary in the coal mine for character. There is a wild story about this involving golfers and an alligator that perfectly illustrates how fragile speech really is.
Yes, I love this story.
Okay.
So 2 golfers are out on a course and they encounter an alligator. One golfer, just trying to be funny, jokingly says, you know what, I think I could wrestle that alligator. It's clearly a joke.
Obviously a joke.
But his partner doesn't take it as a joke. He takes it seriously. starts egging him on, challenging his ego. And before you know it, a casual throwaway joke escalates into a genuinely dangerous, ego-driven situation where someone is actually considering doing something incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
It's a perfect metaphor for the concept of Leviathan.
Yes. Leviathan is the idea that words, once they leave your mouth, take on a monstrous life of their own. What is spoken honestly, or even jokingly, can be received, manipulated, and escalated dishonestly by the environment.
So you have to be so careful.
Guarding against that gap between what you say and what Leviathan does with it requires immense daily discipline. It is why the Buddha taught the famous three-part filter for speech.
Which is?
Before you speak, you must ask yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
And this aligns so perfectly with Marcus Aurelius and the group known as the Stoic opposition. These were figures in Rome who flat out refused to go along with political lies, even when it cost them their lives or their freedom. Marcus had this internal mandate to speak the truth as you see it, without hesitation.
But here's the critical connection back to our overarching theme. Truth-telling, in both the Buddhist and Stoic traditions, is not a heroic outburst.
It's not a movie moment.
Exactly. It isn't standing on a table and shouting your truth to a crowd once in your life. It is the quiet, boring habit of speech maintained daily. You do not suddenly become a brave truth-teller in a crisis if you have spent the last 5 years telling white lies, cutting corners, and gossiping in your daily conversations. The armor wasn't built in the garage.
But filtering your words constantly, doing the daily underwater training, taking the walks, refusing to compromise your soul inch by inch, it is undeniably exhausting. Human beings get tired.
They absolutely do.
So what actually carries a person through the hardship required to maintain this slow build over decades?
The answer that echoes across every discipline we've looked at is purpose. A deep anchoring why. Former President Jimmy Carter captured this when he said, "I feel I have one life to live. Let me live my life so that it will be meaningful."
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
And we see this taken to its absolute extreme with figures like James Stockdale and Viktor Frankl. Both of those men endured unimaginable, horrific conditions in captivity as prisoners of war.
And they didn't survive that just through raw physical endurance, right? You can't just bench press your way out of a POW camp.
Exactly. They survived the paradox of their horrific conditions by actively choosing to transform their suffering into something with profound purpose. They decided that how they bore their suffering would be their ultimate testament to human dignity.
Wow.
Tolstoy made the exact same claim. He argued that suffering isn't just a nuisance you try to escape. It is a mechanism that brings a person closer to their underlying purpose through inner perfection.
Even when you look at it from the perspective of pure ambition and craft, purpose is the engine. Maya Angelou said, you have to do what you love so well that people can't take their eyes off you. Les Brown talked about doing today what others simply won't do. Whatever you compound daily, whether it is your habit, your example, your truthfulness, or your patience, eventually becomes undeniably visible to the world.
Because purpose gives you the stamina to outlast resistance, habits without a why are ultimately hollow.
So what does this all mean? It's like an engine without a steering wheel. It might run for a while, but it's going to crash. If I look at how sports coaches apply this, it perfectly synthesizes the philosophy. You cannot find your composure under the bright Friday night lights if you haven't drilled it repeatedly in a quiet, empty gym.
Right.
But you will never survive the agonizing boredom and the pain of the quiet gym unless you have fundamentally decided that the hard season is meaningful to you. You have to decide the why before you can endure the how.
You have to choose the meaning before you endure the repetition. Conditioning, film study, the daily grind, it only sustains itself if you have decided it matters deeply to who you are becoming.
As we wrap up this journey, let's quickly recap the ground we've covered today. We've learned that habits are not chores. They are trained soldiers we deploy against internal resistance. We've seen that character is absorbed passively through proximity, meaning we are heavily shaped by who we watch, just as Marcus watched Antoninus.
And we've realized that we must remain incredibly vigilant against the slow drift of creeping compromise by anchoring our daily words and actions to a deeper purpose.
Exactly.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, drawing from a specific challenging line in the coaching notes we reviewed. The line is, "You are Antoninus to somebody."
Well, that gives me chills.
Think about the people in your life right now, your kids, your coworkers, your younger siblings, your friends. If they are quietly absorbing your habits at this very moment, what invisible lessons are you teaching them through your own unexamined daily repetitions? What are they learning about patience, about truth, or about compromise just by watching you when you think no one is looking?
That is a heavy but incredibly vital question to carry with you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to step away from the noise today, maybe take a long walk, breathe deeply, and think about your own slow build. Because remember, your character isn't waiting for a movie script moment to be forged. You are installing the shock absorbers piece by piece right now.